How you feeling?
I'm feeling really good.
Good.
It's been a week of cranking up the grind.
Yeah.
It feels good again.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering while I was in a rut for a little bit, that kind of end of the year rut.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long year. Feels like you've
Mm-hmm.
been running a long race.
Right.
So feel that need to like rest, like
Uh,
pull over, pit stop for a little bit.
yeah.
And I felt it in my spirit. And I was, instead of questioning what's going on and looking at it as inconvenient, I kind of leaned into it. I
Okay.
was like, all right, well, I know it's going to be a busy top of the year. Let me take some time to throttle down, kind of reset,
Mm-hmm.
get some clarity,
Yeah.
and then hit it hard. So it's been a few weeks of just really getting after it and forcing that discipline, forcing that discomfort. And now that light's starting to cut on. And I always remember, like, anytime I get into a rut, it's generally because I've took a breather
Mm-hmm.
and then overlooking the fact that breathers continue until you force yourself to get back into the habit of like
Mm-hmm.
grinding,
Yeah.
driving.
So where are you now? You're back in the car, hitting the gas,
Oh yeah,
or okay?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we
Feels
need a
good.
pit stop every now and then. Pit stop, change the tires, get back on the road.
That's it.
We just can't, we can't get in the pit stop for too long. No,
No,
but I agree with that. It makes sense. And then that idea of intentional pit stops,
right.
right?
Intentional.
Where intentional pit stops, where it's like, look, where they're part of the culture is saying grind, 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 gas, gas, gas,
Correct.
burn the tires, ride it till the wheels fall off. And you also have another side of the culture that then says, don't worry, you're going to get there. It's
Right.
part of the journey. It's really the journey, not the destination. Even if you don't get there, the journey was worth it, right? So there's that dialogue,
Facts.
right? Right. So what's interesting is that for people to decipher and to get a little bit of a little bit from each,
Right.
to say no, I might not need to subscribe to 100% hustle mode all the time, don't sleep 3 hours, up at 4:30, jump into the cold plunge, nonstop,
Mm-hmm.
while at the same time the idea of self-care wasn't even two words that were put together 40 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, I don't think that in the building of this country, or the building of the world, or the building of the infrastructure that we're sitting in here right now, or the roadways or the sewers. I'm not sure that the words self care were used with those
Mm.
that were forging forward and building something, right? So, yeah, they're those two words can be misused together as much as they can be useful together.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have those two words together, where do you find the balance between hustle and self care? And that's the idea that we just came up with right now, which is the idea of a pit stop, right? Where figuring out when your wheels are about to burn out, figuring out when you're stomping on the gas too much versus running out of gas down the road.
Mm-hmm.
You run out of gas, it's going to take you longer to get out your car, walk, find a gas station, find gas. But if you're aware of how far your body gets off of certain elements,
Mm-hmm.
then you can be aware and say, you know what, quick pit stop, quick pit stop, quick pit stop. What do I need to change my tires, change the oil, throw a little bit of, change the gasoline. Oh, it's going to be cold out. Oh, I need to put snow tires on. Oh, I need to put an additive in my gas tank because at a certain temperature, the diesel fuel turns jelly. Got it. So all of those things are awareness, especially for men to realize, is not getting caught up in this idea of over hustle versus
Mm-hmm.
over self care. And it's a very, very thin line. Each man has to decipher where they are and what they need. Using this blanket um, instruction based on what's needed and necessary, like the I'm gonna go hard every single day, versus what, self care, take care of yourself. It's about the journey. It's not about the destination. It is about the destination, right? Because you want to go somewhere. It is 1,000% about the destination,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, the journey along the way is absolutely what makes you, or what makes getting to the destination better. And what makes you, and the journey along the way is what is going to have made you into who you are. So there's an immense value in the journey, but let's not get it twisted. The goal is the destination. Now, when you get to the destination, does it mean you're just going to park the car and just sit there? And probably not. It's just an arbitrary goal. At that point, the old adage of move the goalposts, right?
Correct. Keep
Move
moving.
move the end zone, move the goalposts, right? You got to keep pushing it. So, this idea of balance between hustle and self-care is one that each person, each man has to figure out where they lie and what they need at that given moment. And it all takes reflection. Everything is reflection. That's my biggest word so far for this year, is the word reflection. Because I don't think we do it enough. I know I don't do it enough.
Reflection and production.
100%. And production is the motto, which is like, this is what we're going to do this year. It's all about production. And the biggest word that I've been using towards better production, right? So they've been feeding each other. So reflection has been the first verb that I'm using towards production, right? So how do I produce more? Reflect more. And that they've been helping each other. Yeah. So thinking of reflecting like a verb.
Yeah, like right, go inside.
Completely.
Yeah.
And the more I go down that path, the more I realize that that's the goal behind journaling. That's the goal behind praying. That's the goal behind meditating. It all encompasses reflection, right? If you're writing down, if you're journaling about your day, if you're reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, right? That's a perfect example.
Yeah, it's really
or
good.
Writings of Seneca.
Right.
Right. What are they? They're reflections of things that have happened and things that they got out of it. So the idea of taking the word reflect and making it a verb and reflecting on your day and even adding that into your daily regimen. Like, hey, listen, it goes off at 10 o'clock at night. I got an alarm that goes off and it says reflect. And getting into the practice of just sitting through and going through your day, seeing what went well, seeing what, just seeing what happened. It was a really interesting interview I saw the other day with Alex Hormozi. And he brought up this idea that trauma, the word trauma and the feeling of trauma is a decision, and trauma in and of itself doesn't exist. And I may be botching this a little bit,
right.
But the thought process is that there's a little video of a man holding his baby son or daughter, and as he's walking through a door, he knocks on the door as if the baby's head hit the door. And then him and his wife react like, oh, are you okay? Are you all right? As if the baby had hit their head.
Right.
And what happens is the baby started crying because of the energy. Are you okay? Oh, no, that must have hurt so much. Right? And then the second part of that video is a young boy, a toddler, falls off a jungle gym.
Right.
And then the mom's like, oh, you took a fun fall. Or something.
Fun fall, right.
You took a fun fall, and starts laughing. And
almost makes the pain exciting a little bit.
Makes the pain exciting and puts it into perspective and saying, okay, well, when something like this happens, I'm being trained how to react to it. So when I fall, am I being trained to laugh and say it was part of the journey?
Or panic.
Right. Or panic and realize the pain and focus on the pain rather than focus on the production of it. So it was fascinating. So Alex Hormozi's perspective is that, look, trauma's not real, just things happen. And when you can figure out how to deal with them, then whatever happens, you can get to a point and you can look through it and say, how did I handle this situation? And if I handled it in a way that I'm comfortable with, I got to move on.
That's a great point, and that's a great statement. It's good wisdom. It leads me to thinking about, like, we're artists. We create the artistic expression of our life, and things are going to happen all the time, and how we choose to respond to what happened is what eventually creates our life and creates our picture. And so if we take it from a vantage point of positivity, then naturally we're going to make efforts as making our art more positive, more abundant, more vibrant.
Yeah.
If we take it as always panic, negativity, then the colors in the art may reflect colors of sorrow, colors of, defeat, depression, anger, and so it just makes me really believe like we have so much power in the mind, and happiness is a choice more so than just a feeling that we are all hoping that we can have on a daily basis. It's like, no, happiness is a choice. The same shit happens to everyone. There's going to be highs, there's going to be lows. And if you have a mentality of looking at the benefit or the glass half full, then you might create more happiness in your life, regardless of the highs and the lows and what happens. But you said a point, going back to the previous point about like the dual side to the hustle mentality. And I think generally we listen to a lot of people who are high achievers, and they make statements of, I went hard, but I wish I would have spent more time on that self-care. And so now we're looking at how to find an answer to not necessarily a problem, but a question, which is how can I hustle and grind and maximize my output without degrading my internal systems, and there's no easy balance to that. It's really just about having that marathon mentality of everybody would like to run 26 miles. However, it's a reason why some gas out.
Right.
That's probably because they didn't have a plan.
Right.
They didn't have a proper method of when to push hard and when to speed and when to throttle down.
Right.
When to switch gears.
Yep.
And I think that philosophy of knowing how to switch your own gears through life is kind of what can keep you balanced so you don't burn out.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And having that strategy, having that plan, knowing when and where to switch gears, seeing someone that's already gotten to the destination you want to go. Right. That's a no-brainer. Right. Finding someone that's gotten to that destination. Now, so what you said also was that sometimes what will happen is the person at that destination at some point in their life will then voice regrets or voice how they would have done things differently. At the same time, we as men have to get better at reflecting what they say and deciphering what they say. Here's what I mean. If you were to say to someone, well, they won a championship, right? When looking back, I wouldn't have gone as hard and spent more time with my family. Now, does that mean they may not have won the championship? Right? There you go. So now it would have done an absolute vast trajectory of their life, even by 1 degree or 2 degrees, because they didn't work as hard. Where they would end up, would they have won the championships? I don't know the answer, but all of that has to be taken with a grain of salt whenever you're getting advice or whenever you're ingesting someone's perspective. And that's the beauty of being able to have access to a lot of perspectives, a lot of strategies. The most challenging part is to be able to take those perspectives, take those strategies, take those opinions, and form your own. I think one of the biggest challenges we have in the modern culture for young men is critical thinking.
Big time.
So if we look at critical thinking as the skill that should come out of school, critical thinking being the number one skill parents should be teaching their children.
100%.
Then a young man or young woman can take what they're seeing with the input that's going into their eyes, the input going into their ears, and be able to critical think based on what they said.
Correct.
Because we don't know, if a person has gotten to a destination and say, well, I wish I had done this, and you should do this, and you should focus more on self-care.
Right.
Now, again, we don't know whether or not they would have gotten up the mountain. If they would have taken more breaks heading up, going up the mountain, who's to say they would have ever made it? And at that point, you wouldn't even be having a conversation with that point, because the reason you're listening to that person is because they made it to the top of the mountain. So any advice that they're heeding at that point may be productive, may be counterproductive. I don't know. That's why I firmly believe the greatest skill for any young man, any young woman to develop is critical thinking.
100%.
Because now you can ingest hustle culture. You can ingest self-care culture. You can ingest wisdom. You can ingest comedy. Right. It was interesting. The interview with Alex Hormozi, he said that on his personal Instagram feed, all he has is comedy and philosophy.
Right.
And I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
And I was like, huh, comedy and philosophy. And he's very stoic, and the way he communicates is of course from years of becoming who he is. And
Correct.
I respect him very much.
Big time.
And he says the only thing I want on there is comedy and philosophy because they are the ones that are rooted in the most truth. And I was like, "Woo, get him!
I like
get
that.
him!"
I like that.
Because he's like, "Listen, there's comedians that tell the truth.
Yeah.
They joke about it. They tell the truth. And philosophy, whether it be hard to swallow, sometime is rooted in some type of truth rather than feeling." And I thought that was very interesting. So
I agree.
So what I was saying, the idea of critical thinking, being able to ingest the hustle culture, ingest the self-care culture, then being able to critically think as to where that would work in your recipe,
Correct.
in your strategy,
Mhm.
and understand what it is they're saying and seeing if that's something you want to add to your strategy, remove from your strategy, discard from even considering, no problem. Right? It's even in fitness. Right? Someone could have this physique that you want, and they say, well, this is what I did, or I would have done this differently, but you have to make a decision based on your physique, what your goals are, where you want to go from a health perspective, right? So it's all very interesting, this idea of critical thinking, being able to take these different perspectives.
100%.
And the better you get at being a critical thinker, the more engagement you can have with people that are in countless numbers of places in their life, and be able to have that conversation and critically think as to what they're saying and understand whether or not it's something that you want to utilize or it's something that you don't, and no harm, no foul.
Right.
No one is victimizing you or pushing you towards somewhere you don't want to go. If it turns out that someone's advice and is aligned with where they are emotionally at that given point, because now they get older and they wish they had more kids, got it. Completely. And, at the same time, hopefully they're communicating it in a way that says if they would have decided to have more kids, maybe they wouldn't have got as far up this other mountain. It would have been a different mountain. And the time that they had to put into that other mountain would have taken away from this specific mountain.
Mm-hmm.
No harm, no foul. There's no right or wrong answer. But that goes into us not glorifying anyone and not idolizing anyone.
True.
Looking at everyone as humans, being able to deferentially humble ourselves and learn from everyone that we meet, and decide whether or not it's something we want to add to our library or not.
Correct.
There have been books I've read, and I just, this is something I don't want to add to my library, and I've donated the book somewhere because it's not something that's part of my library. And that's a very interesting point. As a person reads, as you're reading, make a decision to say, do I want this in my library? And then add it to your library. And I find it fascinating if I'm in someone's home or their office and look at the books that are on the wall. And it'll tell you a lot about the person. It will tell you a lot about the person. You're looking at someone, are you in someone's home and there's nothing but novels, murder mysteries, right? Or is it educational? Is it cookbooks? Right? A person's library says a lot about who they are. I like the way that ended. The library says a lot about who they are.
No, that says a lot. Big time. I was listening to a quote from Rick Ross. I don't know if he was on a podcast or something like that, but he said, I don't want to move fast. I want to move correct. And then I heard, recycled a bunch of times. But the first place I heard it from was Rick Ross.
That's a good one.
I don't want to move fast. I want to move correctly. And it's like going back to the output conversation, the hustle conversation. It's like, yeah, we can move fast, but fast doesn't guarantee we get to the destination. But moving correctly generally will guarantee that you'll get to the destination. But it's not setting our expectation inappropriately to the time that it's going to take to get to the expectation. I mean, to the destination. I think we want to get there so fast. We're like, well, the faster I move, the faster I get there. It's like, well, that may not be the correct method for what you're doing. And it takes me to the philosophy of pruning. And with any growth, there's going to be a process of pruning or trimming that's going to be needed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at, plants, if you just
Mm-hmm.
look at the history of plants, as they grow, they have a natural way of pruning themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You look at reptiles, they have a natural way of shedding their skin. If you look at just the world and seasons change, that's the earth showing the philosophy of pruning.
Mm-hmm.
There's a summer, but then there's a winter.
Got it.
There's a time to work, then there's a time to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's funny that you talked about reflection, because I
Mhm.
think that actually represents a lot of the pruning, the natural pruning that we all need to take, to where it's not necessarily a pit stop to where we're stopping progress, but we may take time to go through a process of output, sprinting, running, but then now maybe as humans, our pruning process, our trimming process, so that we can maximize growth moving forward, is reflection. Go, push, do, but now reflect, because then when you can go inside and you can reflect, now you can learn. Now you can review game film. Now you can make adjustments. Now you can pivot. Now you can do things and make moves with the wisdom that you should give as a gift to yourself from the things that you're doing. And that's probably how you strategically get better and better and better and become more efficient. And you naturally increase the pace because you're moving so much more correctly from the lessons that you're learning through the pruning process that's necessary. And pruning can also be self-care. But if we don't take that time to ourselves to reflect, too many distractions, we'll burn out.
Yep.
And to your point, the goalposts will always move
Yep.
without our intention.
Yep. No, that's a fantastic point. And the idea of the pruning reminds me of another strategy along those same lines, which is weeding,
Mm-hmm.
right? The same thought process.
Yep.
Where if you are growing a garden, it's very important to weed the garden, because those weeds will take the nutrients that are necessary for what you want to grow.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea behind it is that now pruning is similar, from the fact that you have to remove something
Right.
off of the plant that you want to grow.
Yep.
And then the other strategy is weeding. And sometimes you got to weed. You got to weed people. You got to weed habits.
Yep.
You got to weed vices. You got to weed foods that aren't good
Mm-hmm.
for you, right? So the idea of weeding, I think, goes right along perfectly with the idea of pruning.
Yep.
Pruning is crafting of what it is that, physically, let's say, that's in your body, and then weeding is your environment,
Mm-hmm.
right? You got to weed the environment because you want this one rose bush to grow,
Right.
and you got these weeds, but there's only so much nutrients, there's only so much water, there's
Facts.
only so much sunshine, and they're taking the nutrients away from what you want to grow,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how do you figure that out? Now, to the self-care conversation, it can even be looked at from a biblical perspective, right? What do they say? Work 6 days. Work 6 days, 1 day, don't work.
Right.
Period, end of story. So that's a pretty good formula to go by, right? So if a person goes by that formula, it's 6 work, 1 rest, as opposed to modern culture, just, it's making it this abstract concept where a person has to then use brain power to critically think and say,
Mm-hmm.
what is enough rest? I don't know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the input, right? Like it depends on how far you went, how fast you went. So there's always going to be there's never going to be a right answer
Mm-hmm.
to how much rest is necessary to keep moving.
Right.
Because just as Jim Rohn said, if you got a big enough why, you'll always know the how, right? So that's going to be part of it. One last thing I will add. So we have this idea of pruning, 1000%, right? And then weeding, right? So we come back, it's like weeding and pruning so that our farm grows.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, I'll have people consider is that even with the Rick Ross comment, the one thing that can be confusing about the word correct is that it feels binary,
Mm-hmm.
right? It feels right or wrong, correct, incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge that I've had people think about is that forging forward to doing anything is not a binary right or wrong, because there's probably, guilty as charged, times where I've been in my life
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't moved forward with the idea of, is this the correct way to do it? Is this the correct
Right.
step? Is this the correct strategy? And I think that can paralyze us sometimes.
Oh yeah.
In the binary approach. Now, I don't think Rick Ross is coming from a disingenuous place and
Right.
saying correct. I understand what he's saying.
Yep.
In just adding to it and saying that if you have 2 points, if there were 2 points on this table and there was a cat moving around to get here, move, go, right?
Yeah.
Walk,
Right.
action,
Mm-hmm.
right? The correct thing to do is take action,
Correct.
right? That's the correct thing to do. And what can happen is that you might look back and say, okay, I took this path. Someone else got to the exact same place and took another path. The bird flew.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Right? The bird flew,
Right.
the snake slithered,
Right.
the bunny hopped,
But they got there
but
their
they
own
got
way.
there, right?
Yep.
So I think it's very important. Again, I don't think Rick Ross is coming from a disingenuous place. I think it's very important for people to be critical thinkers,
Right.
to be able to say, the correct thing to do is to take action.
Right.
The correct thing to do is to leverage my critical thinking skills to make the decision that is most aligned with my objective.
Yep.
Right. So at that point, because there could be many correct paths to take. So anyone watching, I say, listen, it's not right or wrong. It's not whether a step is right or wrong. Usually to do nothing can be leaning on the wrong side. At the same time, there is 10% of the time where no response is the right response. So again, everything is about critical thinking. It's not binary. It's not, well, you have to respond. Action, 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 no matter what, no matter what. Because again, sometimes no response is the right response. Sometimes not engaging is the right thing to do. Sometimes not going somewhere is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's about the critical thinking skills that will allow you to make the decision that at the time feels the most correct. Now, it may not be, but never get paralyzed into making a decision or taking action with the only way you're moving forward is with the correct, with the correct way. Because again, just like I said, there's infinity number of ways for things to be accomplished, and the correct thing is to leverage critical thinking, apply, take action, or even make a decision, because that decision could be to not take action.
Mm-hmm.
And that could be correct and could be not correct. And that's the challenge with the hustle culture being on the spectrum of the self-care culture, right? So it's this massive spectrum that someone says, no, there needs to be this amount of self-care, this amount of hustle, this amount of hustle, this amount of self-care. But it all goes back to one concept, which is critical thinking, so that you can ingest what's going on in the environment. The better you get at critical thinking, the better you can process situations, the better you can process issues. And that, I believe, is the skill that will be the most valuable going into the future when it comes to, because it's not going to be computing, it's not going to be writing code, AI is going to do all that, right? There's so much is going to be taken over with AI and the capabilities there. The number one skill going forward in the workforce, in my opinion, is going to be critical thinking.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And you hear about that a lot recently because you have so many people questioning the school system and the mass benefit, because we're seeing that the economical opportunities aren't all linked to a degree and aren't all linked to the knowledge that we're learning through the curriculum. But when you understand that school is teaching us how to problem solve and how to critically think, it's preparing us for whatever we choose, whatever position we choose to go, whatever path we choose to take. It's preparing us to try to figure out the ebbs and flows and figure out how to strategically win in that realm. However, I think there also should be a strong component of teaching us about this machine that we do have, being our bodies. And I think that's going to be through emotional control. So I think that you have critical thinking, you have problem solving, that's a benefit. And I think something that can be added as well into that pool of important factors is emotional intelligence. And when you understand how not to be controlled, but how to gain control of who you are through emotional intelligence, now you can not be misled by your own doings, because you're aware of the ways in which that you in your vessel are going to respond and react to certain happenings in life. And now you can control from a state of intention versus a state of impulsivity. And then you have far less amounts of regret that way. And you can move a lot more correctly down the road. But you said something like, we don't know what the appropriate amount of hustle versus rest is. It's like an uncertainty there, and that uncertainty can lead to indecision. That indecision can lead to you being paralyzed, right? Paralysis through analysis.
Right.
There's a lot of us because so much information, and I think the importance there is to identify the mission. And anytime I get really complicated in my thoughts and there's so much going on, I go back to the mission. The mission always seems to be unwavering in my life, and it seems that way a lot of people's lives. If we keep our focus on the mission, now everything that else is going around it, we're almost training our eye to tune in to the things that are required for the mission.
Yep.
And so now we can kind of suppress or reduce or eliminate or know how to eliminate intentionally other things that aren't attributed or associated to the mission.
100%.
And it comes through a high level of self-identity and reflection and all that type of stuff, going back into yourself. But understanding what your mission is. Now, if I want to build a table, I know I need wood, I need screws, I need a hammer, I need some nails, right? If I want to build a car, I need a whole different amount of components. Whatever you're trying to build is going to come with its set of materials and instructions. And so it's identifying the mission, aka what we're trying to build. And then we now know appropriately, okay, based on this mission, based on where I'm going, based on where I want to be as far as a fulfilled person at the end of my days, these are the materials that I need to identify and gather so I can continue to build
completely
and get there.
Completely. And even if we use a metaphor of a vehicle, like if your body is a vehicle, getting to a destination based on where you've just decided you want to go. And if we use a vehicle as a car, what kind of tires do we need? Do we need a Jeep or do we need a race car, right? If the person's goal is to go as fast as possible, their goal is to have a certain, they want to have a Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, low to the ground. But if a person wants to go off-road, what their destination is to go through mountains, that car is going to be useless. Absolutely useless. Right. So back to your point of focusing on the mission, seeing things in your peripheral, but always staying focused on that one point. And one of the things that I always talk about is this idea of your mission on a compass, right? And that's what a compass is. A compass always points to north, always. So whenever you're lost, whenever you're wandering around, whenever you find yourself confused, pull out your compass. That's it. And if you get yourself trained to say those words, pull out your compass, pull out your compass, pull out your compass. Now, your compass will point to your mission that you've decided that's where you want to go. Now, the interesting part of that is then if you pull it up and all of a sudden there's a wall in front of you.
Right.
Okay. At the same time, your compass is pointing that way. Therefore, get the ladder.
Right. Right.
Get the ladder.
Right.
What would you like me to do?
Right.
The wall is there. Okay, no problem. Then don't head towards your mission. Right. And that's a good concept for people to think about because some people will then, it was just supposed to be this path. It was just supposed to be a road. It was supposed to be paved and there was supposed to be gas stations along the way. And I was never supposed to get a flat tire and I was never supposed to lose engine pressure and have a cylinder, blow. No, it was just supposed to be a drive.
Yep.
Right. Because it was pointing there and it was easy. The compass just told me the way. At the same time, it's illogical and irresponsible to think that it's just going to be easy. It's not. The key is to know, as you said, to focus in on your vision, let the other peripherals fall by the wayside if necessary. And that's the idea of pulling out your compass. Looking at the compass. That's my north. That's where I'm going. That's my mission. If there's a wall, I need to find a ladder. If there's, when they first built the roadways going across the United States, let's say, there were times they blew holes in mountains, right? Or had to, take trees out of the way in order to forge the path.
Right.
So if you're forging the path and you're constantly looking at true north, your true north, then whatever obstacles in the way, now you have to figure out where it is that, or how you're going to get through or around, maybe around. Not saying every wall you come to, you're going to get a sledgehammer. It could be that you've come to this point. You're now standing in front of a 20-story building. It's still pointing that way. At the same time, it might mean you need to make a left.
Right.
Go you know, and growing up in New York City, this is probably a good metaphor, right? Because there's plenty of times where the roads, if you're driving, right, each of the streets are one way
One
the other
way,
way,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And some of the
yeah.
big avenues are too.
Hmm.
So if it turns out, if you're going down Fifth Avenue, right, Fifth Avenue goes south,
Right.
right, but you miss the street, but now you're going south and you need to get over to Lexington and you need to get to Lexington and 31st, but 31st is going west. So now
Right,
you get to
right, right,
31st
right.
and you want to make a left because you want to go, but you can't. It's a one-way street.
Hmm.
And it's a perfect metaphor of understanding the landscape and saying, okay, now when I get to 32nd, I have to make a left there
Right.
in order to go east because 31st goes west. Now I need to go east, but then Lexington goes south, but now I need to come back around to, you know, so I can come back up Park
Right.
because Park goes north and south, but it has this, you know, it has these trees in the middle.
Yep.
And it's hard to cross over.
Yep.
But now if I can go to Lex goes south, but then Sixth goes north, right?
Yep.
And anyone from New York is laughing right now because
yeah.
they know it's true.
Yeah.
They know that's how you
a lot
drive
going
around
on.
Manhattan.
Mhm.
And you have to understand that. And that's exactly how life can be if you look at it from that perspective. Now, you can either bitch and you can complain and you can say that, oh, this stoplight is in the way and I can't believe this road goes one way. I understand.
Right.
I wholeheartedly understand. Let's go back to critical thinking and realize that in order for your vehicle to get to where you're trying to go, you're trying to get to Madison Square Garden, you're trying to get to Grand Central, right? You're trying to get down to South Ferry, right? You're somewhere you're trying to go,
Right.
even though you're looking at your compass and saying, I have to go south, or I want to get to Central Park, and I'm on Fifth Avenue, it says north. I understand that. Fifth Avenue travels south. You can't take Fifth.
Facts.
You just can't. Well, why not? It says to go north. I understand that. If you do that, you will have a head-on collision and die. So how many people are going through life forging a path without using critical thinking, getting into unnecessary accidents because they're not using those critical thinking skills? One last thing I'll say. You mentioned school earlier. Critical thinking skills, emotional intelligence, and knowledge and learning. What I would consider problem solving, and what I would consider is that the modern day school system isn't designed to deliver critical thinking or emotional intelligence skills. It's not what it's designed for. Now, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier with Fifth Avenue going south. Deal with it. Fifth Avenue goes south. And I believe there's a lot of parents out there that are putting the responsibility of all of that learning on the school system. And I think the model of the school system is to instill a predetermined set of knowledge based on the curriculum that's decided by people to say, this is the fourth grade curriculum. It will not go off this path. It will not be adjusted based on who's ingesting it.
Right.
This is the meal of fourth grade. Okay. I hold it is then the parents' responsibility to teach the critical thinking. I think the school system teaches a lot of memorization, and I think they teach, they reward based on an arbitrary system. And if you act only towards that system, then you will only worry about grades versus the idea of critical thinking and developing your skills around critical thinking, because you'll be punished. It won't just that you're only rewarded for good behavior, you'll also be punished and shunned. Now, I'm a firm believer in understanding that a person should be critiqued based on the amount of input they put in. But it's also, again, I believe it's the parent's responsibility to be able to do the rest of the work from critical thinking, emotional intelligence. Schools are there to create a very small bucket of knowledge per year based on a predetermined curriculum. So I don't think it's the school's responsibility to even teach critical thinking. It's a nice thought. At the same time, you have one teacher to X number of students. It's a very challenging task to even consider this idea. And to me, it points back to the parents. It's a parent's responsibility to teach their children emotional intelligence. It's a parent's responsibility to lead in helping them understand the emotions that they're going through and to how to develop those critical thinking skills. wholeheartedly believe that that's the parent's responsibility.
Sound like parenting needs to be a school in itself,
Well,
so that they can learn how
well,
to
great question.
teach.
Well, listen, great point you just made.
Yeah.
And the question is that how often, if ever, have you heard of people going through parenting courses? I don't even know if they exist, right? But like, oh, I'm going to take but no, someone will take a course on, oh, I'm going to take a course on content creation. I'm going to take a course
Right.
on this. I'm going to take a course on that. When was when was the last time, or if at all, right? Comment below. Maybe there is one. I don't know.
Right.
I haven't seen one. That's all I'm saying. Courses on being a good parent. Now, I'm not saying there's not literature written. I'm not saying there's not books. But when have you actively seen someone or been in a place where someone's like, well, I'm about to have kids and I'm taking this course. I'm actively going out. No, people just think that because they can reproduce, it somehow makes them a good parent. Yeah, everyone thinks they're a great parent. It's the same with driving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, have you ever asked people if they think they're a good or bad driver?
Mm.
90% say they're above average.
Yeah.
If you say, are you an average driver? Are you below average, average, or above average? Right? Do a little experiment at home. Ask people, 98% will most likely say above average.
Mm.
And that's the same thought with parenting. Everyone thinks they're a great parent, right? And I am not critiquing personally.
At all.
All I'm saying is that parenting in and of itself is a skill.
Big time these days, for sure.
Completely. And what are the strategies around being a good parent? Who are you learning? Where are you constantly getting new information?
Right.
And that's something that if we balance critical thinking to then figure out, well, critical thinking says that if I want to be a good parent, a great parent, I need to learn from good parents, great parents. And where are those opportunities to learn? The same way, if a person wants to be a championship basketball player, where are those opportunities to learn from champions in their field? And I think that there are absolutely champion parents out there right now. Oh, absolutely. There's no violin being played saying we live in some, Mad Max environment and everything is going to hell in a handbasket. What I am saying is that they're out there. The question is that are we seeking that knowledge the same way we seek business knowledge, the same way we seek nutrition knowledge, the same way we seek emotional intelligence knowledge? Are we seeking those parenting skills to be able to be better parents?
Facts.
11.